They told me she had been found at the boundary stones with no pack and no papers, and a mark on her wrist that no one could read. My captain, Drev, said it without much weight, the way a man reports a stray sheep found in the outer field. He had already decided what to do with her. He was waiting only for my word, send her back over the line, or hold her a night and send her in the morning. Either way, she would be gone by dawn. I should have said send her. I did not. I cannot tell you why, even now with her sleeping in the room above mine, and the whole of Thornvael settled into the knowledge that she belongs here. I cannot tell you what moved in my chest when Drev said the words, a mark on her wrist that no one could read, except that something in me shifted the way a heavy stone shifts when water finally finds its way beneath it, not loudly, not fast, but with a certainty that the ground would never be the same again. I told him to bring her to the hall. Thornvael's great hall is gray stone and torchlight, the same as it has been for 300 years. The beams above are black with smoke. The floors are worn smooth in the paths that matter, from the fire to the high table, from the door to the dais, from the dais to the passage that leads down to the records chamber where old Bryn keeps everything the pack has ever known. I have walked those paths 10,000 times. I know every seam in the stone. I stood at the high table when they brought her in. She was not what I expected, though I could not have told you what I expected. A wanderer, Drev had said. A woman alone, no pack scent on her, no pack mark anyone recognized. I thought perhaps a young woman frightened into stillness, or an older woman hardened by too many turnings away. I thought I would see the shape of someone who had been beaten down long enough that it showed in the set of her shoulders. What I saw was Marin. She was dark-haired, travel-worn, dressed in a plain brown cloak that had seen at least one hard winter. She was not young and not old, somewhere in that country between, where a person has lived enough to know what they are and has stopped pretending otherwise. She walked into my hall the way a woman walks into a room she has not been invited into but will not apologize for entering. Her chin was level. Her eyes moved across the torches, the tables, the wolves lying near the fire, and then they moved to me. She did not drop her gaze. I am the Alpha King of Thornvael. I have had men twice her size drop their eyes before mine. She held mine for a full breath, measured me the way a person measures a road they have not yet decided to take, and then she looked at the stone floor and waited. Drev stepped forward. She was at the third boundary stone. No pack, no documentation, no claim, the mark on her wrist. He glanced at her. Show him. She turned her left wrist upward without a word. The mark was on the inner wrist, below the pulse. Woad blue, the way all the old clan marks are, the ink that does not fade, that goes in deep, that the old blood workers used before the art was lost to most of the lowlands. It was not large. It was a half circle, split at the top, with 3 lines running through it that curved slightly downward, like the shadow of a bird in flight, or the upper half of an old seal whose bottom had been cut away. I knew that mark. I knew it the way I know my own name, the way I know the face of my father in the carved stone above the records room door, not because I had seen it recently, not because anyone had described it to me, but because I carry its twin on my own right wrist, and something in the blood knows the shape of its other half even when the mind does not. My own mark, which had been quiet and cold for 20 years, went up like a torch. The heat moved from my wrist to my arm to my chest before I had drawn my next breath. It was not pain. It was the opposite of pain, the sensation of a thing long held in tension finally releasing, a knot that has been pulled tight for so long that the loosening of it aches in a way that is also relief. My wolf, who had been still at the back of my mind since I was young, not sleeping but waiting, lifted his head. I gripped the edge of the table. Drev was still speaking. I did not hear him. I was looking at the mark on her wrist and feeling my own answer to it, and the world had gone very quiet in the way it goes quiet when something is about to change. Leave her, I said. Drev stopped. My lord. Leave her here, clear the hall. He looked at the woman, then at me, and to his credit he read my face well enough to know this was not a discussion. He gestured to the two guards. The hall emptied in a count of breaths. The wolves near the fire did not move. They watched me with yellow eyes, still as stone, and the oldest of them, a gray male I call Roth, who has been with me since he was a pup and I a young king, got slowly to his feet and walked to stand 3 paces from the woman and sat down. He had never done that with anyone. She looked at him, then at me. What is his name? Roth. He's old. 17 years. She looked at him a moment longer, and something in her face shifted. A softening, not pity but recognition, one tired creature acknowledging another. She extended her hand, palm down, the way a person does who knows wolves and does not rush them. Roth put his nose to her knuckles. I had to remind myself to breathe. Sit down, I said, please. The please surprised her. I saw it in the brief flicker of her eyes. She sat at the nearest bench, not the high table, not the place that would have been offered to a guest of standing, just the nearest bench, practical, without performance. She set her wrist on the table, mark upward, as though she knew that was why I had kept her. You've had it all your life, I said. It was not a question. Since I was born, she said. My mother said I came into the world with it already on my skin. She said the midwife called it a birthmark. The village elder, when he saw it later, called it something else. What did he call it? She was quiet a moment. A forgery, she said. He said the mark was a false imitation of clan blood markings. He said someone had put it there to make me seem affiliated with a line I had no right to. He said keeping me in the village gave the village false association, and it would bring trouble. She said all of this without heat, without trembling, the way a person reports a fact that has long since lost its power to wound them daily, though you can hear that it wounded them once. He had me put out when I was 16. 16. I sat with that for a moment. A girl of 16 put out of her village for a mark she had worn since birth. The mark was not a forgery, I said. She looked at me steadily. I know. You know. I have always known. She turned her wrist, looking at it with the calm detachment of long familiarity. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know who put it there or what line it belongs to, but it is not false. It is in the skin, not on it. I've seen forgeries. They sit on top. This goes all the way through. She paused. You've seen it before. I have. Where? I did not answer immediately. I drew back my own right sleeve. My mark is on the right wrist, mirror to hers, the lower half of what hers begins, the 3 lines curving upward instead of downward, the half circle completed into a full seal when hers and mine are placed together. I turned it upward on the table between us. She leaned forward. I saw her take it in, the shape, the color, the depth of the ink, the way the line weight matched hers precisely. I watched her face change. Not shock exactly. More like the expression of someone who has held a half of something for 20 years and has just been handed the other half, and the relief of it is so large it almost looks like grief. That's the same, she said softly. The other half of it, I said. Yours is the upper seal. Mine is the lower. Together they make the full Thornvael bloodline mark, the mark of the royal line, the one that has not been complete since before I was king. She was quiet. Outside, a wind came off the highland and moved through the gap below the door and made the torches lean. Who are you? She said, not to the king, to me. Aldrin, I said. Aldrin of Thornvael. She held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down at our 2 wrists lying parallel on the dark wood of the table, her mark and mine half and half. My name is Marin, she said. I don't know what I am. I have never known, but I think I came here to find out. I called for Bryn before the night was half over. Bryn is old. She has been the pack's record keeper since my father's time, and she moves slowly now and complains about the damp in the records chamber. But there is nothing in Thornvael's bloodline ledgers that she has not read at least twice. She came to the hall wrapped in her gray wool, carrying the smell of old paper and ink, and she looked at Marin with the careful blankness of a woman who has learned not to show what she knows until she has confirmed it. "Show her the mark," I said. Marin turned her wrist. Bryn looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "Come down to the records room, both of you." The records chamber is 3 flights down from the great hall, below the level of the courtyard, cut into the bedrock of the fortress. The walls are shelved from floor to ceiling with ledger books that go back 260 years, each spine marked in Bryn's or her predecessor's hands. It smells of candle wax and the particular cold that comes from stone that never sees sun. Marin looked at the ledgers the way a person looks at a library they have long been told they have no business in, with a hunger they are careful not to show. Bryn went to the far wall. She ran her finger along the spines without hesitating, found what she wanted, and drew out a ledger that was older than the others. The binding worn to thread at the spine, the pages thickened by decades of humidity. She set it on the reading table, opened it to a page near the back, and placed her candle close. "Read here," she said to me. I read. The entry was dated to the year before my father died, in a hand I did not recognize. It was short. It said, "The seal was divided in the old manner, 1/2 to each child, as was done in the founding years when the bloodline needed to be preserved across separation. The elder's portion was placed on the right wrist of the boy child, Aldrin. The younger's portion was placed on the left wrist of the girl child, name not recorded at the keeper's request, for her protection. The girl child was given into the care of the lowland contact on the 3rd day of the new moon. She is to be raised outside the pact territories until such time as the threat that necessitated this division has passed. She carries the full right to the bloodline. The marks will find each other. This is the old compact, witnessed and sealed." I read it twice, then I looked up at Bryn. "You knew," I said. "I did not know the child had survived," she said without apology. "I knew the division happened. Your father told me before he died. He said the girl was placed safely and that the threat would be resolved in his lifetime. He died before it was. I searched for a year after his death and I found no trace of her." She looked at Marin. I had begun to believe she had not lived. Marin had been listening. Her face was very still. "What threat?" she said. Bryn sat down in the keeper's chair slowly, the way old bones require. "There was a man named Cale Venn. He was of the outer council, not of the bloodline himself, but close enough to it to understand what the bloodline meant for succession. He believed that if the full seal was never completed, if the two halves never came together, the kingship could be challenged. He could not destroy the marks once made, but he could destroy the people who bore them." She folded her hands. "Your father was told that a move against the girl child's life had been arranged for the night of her naming ceremony. He moved her the same day. He did not tell me where. He did not tell anyone. Only the lowland contact knew, and that man is long dead." Marin was quiet for a moment. I watched her absorb it, not the way a woman absorbs a shock, but the way a woman absorbs the answer to a question she has been living with for 20 years. Careful, taking it in completely before she responded to any part of it. "He never told you her name," I said to Bryn. "No, he was protecting her. A name in a record is a thread someone can pull." I looked at Marin. She had sat down on the bench beside the reading table, not dramatically, just because the information was large and the body sometimes needs to sit when the mind is working. Her wrist was resting on the table, mark up, and mine was beside it, and in the candlelight the 2 marks were unmistakably the same seal split in 2. "Cale Venn," I said, "he's still alive." "He sits on the outer council," Bryn said carefully. "Not for much longer," I said. I will not pretend that what I felt in those first hours was entirely clear to me. I am a king, and kings are trained from youth to contain what they feel until they have decided what to do with it. And what I felt when I looked at Marin in the records room by candlelight was larger than I had vocabulary for. And so I contained it and attended to the matters that were pressing. I gave her a room in the east wing, the guest quarters that look out over the highland slope, where on clear mornings you can see all the way to the first ridge. I told the house staff to bring her supper and whatever else she needed. I told her that nothing was required of her tonight. She did not need to make any decision, did not need to commit to any understanding of what the marks meant or what it meant that she was here. She had been given no choice about being brought to Thornvael, and I would not compound that by crowding her with demands. She looked at me when I said that with an expression I could not fully read. It was not gratitude, exactly. It was more like the look of a person who has been braced for a certain kind of door to open and finds a different one instead. "You don't know me," she said. "No," I said. "You only know the mark." "That is true." She thought about it. What does the mark mean? What does it mean when both halves come together? What does the old compact actually require of either of us? I sat with that for a moment, because she deserved the honest answer and not the easy one. The old compact says the halves were divided so that the bloodline could survive, I said. It says the marks will find each other. It does not say what happens after. It does not compel. I paused. In our tradition, the full seal is the mark of the Alpha King's fated mate. When the two halves ignite together, when they respond to each other the way mine responded when I saw yours tonight, it means a bond. But a bond is not a command. It is a recognition. What is done with it is the choice of the two people who carry it. She was quiet for a long time. "Mine flared too," she said finally. "When you showed me yours, I didn't say it, but it did." "I know," I said. "I felt it." She looked at me steadily. That same measuring look from the hall, the road she had not yet decided to take. "I have been put out of every place I have ever tried to belong," she said, "because of this mark. I am not in a hurry to make a decision about it in the first evening." "Then don't," I said. "There is time." She nodded once. "Then I will sleep," she said, "and we can speak more in the morning." I left her there and went back down to the records room. Bryn was still at the reading table, the old ledger open in front of her. I sat across from her and we were quiet for a while, the candle burning between us. "She is her father's daughter," Bryn said at last. "You can see it." "The way she holds herself," Bryn said. "He was like that, steady. Didn't give you much on the surface, but you knew, when you were in the room with him, that everything was accounted for behind the eyes." She turned a page. "She has had a hard time of it." "Yes. People who have had a hard time of it either break or they don't, and the ones who don't have a quality about them, a kind of ballast, something weighted in them that doesn't shift easily." She looked at me over the candle. "She doesn't shift easily." "No," I said, "she doesn't." Bryn closed the ledger. "Cale Venn will know by morning that someone was brought in from the outer boundary. He will want to know who. He will ask his people on the outer council." "Let him ask," I said. "By the time he has an answer, I intend to have given him something else to contend with." I did not sleep that night. I went to the wolf hall, where the pack's wolves den in cold weather, and I sat with them for a while in the dark, which I have done since I was a boy when something needed to be thought through without the shape of rooms and duties pressing on it. Roth came and lay beside me with his head on my leg, which he does not do for just anyone, and I put my hand on his gray flank and listened to him breathe. My wolf was not still any more. He had been still for 20 years, not dead, not sleeping, but waiting with the patience of a creature who does not fully understand time, but understands that something is not yet ready. Now he was alert, attentive, turned toward the east wing of the fortress the way a wolf turns toward a scent it has been tracking without knowing it was tracking it. She had said, "I have been put out of every place I have ever tried to belong." I thought about what it means to carry a mark that everyone who sees it tells you is wrong. I thought about a girl of 16, put out of her village. I thought about all the years between then and now. The years of wandering with no pack claim, no documentation, no name in any ledger, with a mark on her wrist that everyone called a forgery, and that she alone knew was genuine because she could feel it in her blood. I thought about what kind of stillness a person builds inside themselves when they have been told for 20 years that what they know to be true about themselves is a lie. I thought about my father, who made a choice in the dark to protect his daughter by hiding her so well that even the people who might have helped her could not find her, and how that protection had curdled into abandonment through no fault of his, only through the fact that he died before he could complete what he had started. I sat with all of it until the wolf hall grew lighter, and the pack began to stir, and Roth lifted his head and looked at me with his old yellow eyes. "I know," I said to him, "I know." She was already in the courtyard when I came out in the early morning. She had found the low wall that runs along the east side, where the ground falls away toward the highland slope, and she was sitting on it with her hands wrapped around a cup of something hot, looking out at the ridge in the far distance. The morning light was pale and clear, the way highland mornings are in early autumn, and it lay across her hair and across the stone wall and made everything look still and finished. I should have left her to it. She had asked for time, and sitting quietly in the early morning looking at a ridge is exactly the kind of thing a person does when they are thinking. I went and sat on the wall a few feet from her. She didn't startle. She glanced at me sidelong and then looked back at the ridge. "It's very far," she said. 2 days' ride to the base of it." "Have you gone up it?" "Once. My father took me when I was 12. You can see 3 kingdoms from the top on a clear day." She was quiet, considering this. "That's a lot," she said. "Most people spend their whole lives not even knowing what's in the next valley." "Is that what it was like, where you were?" She considered the question the way she considered most things, as though it deserved a real answer and not a quick one. "The village was small," she said. "People knew their own hills. When I was a child, I thought all the world must be like that, just hills and the next valley and the valley after that, going on forever, all of it made of the same grass and stone." She turned her cup in her hands. "When the elder put me out, I had nowhere to go, so I walked. And the world turned out to be much larger than the grass and the stone." "Where did you go?" "Everywhere I could get to," she said without self-pity. "I worked where I could work. I moved on when I was not wanted. I learned that there are more places than I thought, and that most of them will take a person in for a season and let them go in the spring, and that is about the best you can expect when you have no pack claim and a mark on your wrist that no one will recognize." She looked at the ridge. "I stopped trying to explain the mark a long time ago. I learned to keep my sleeve down." "You showed it to my boundary keepers." "I was tired," she said simply. "I have been walking for a long time and I was tired, and when the boundary keeper asked me to account for myself, I thought, what does it matter anymore? I showed him. He didn't know what it was either, so he brought me to someone who might." She paused. "I didn't know what I would find. I didn't expect a great haul and an Alpha King and a matching wrist." "No," I said, "I don't suppose you did." The morning light moved and a cloud went over the sun, and the ridge went gray for a moment and then bright again. A pair of hawks were climbing in wide circles above the far slope. "What are you going to do about the man?" she said. "Cale Ven." "He will be brought before the pack this afternoon," I said. "Bryn has the ledger entry. I have witnesses who can speak to his history. There are things he has done in the years since, after the threat he represented lost its teeth, that are documented. He has continued to work against the Bloodline in smaller ways, because old intentions don't simply stop when the original plan fails. There is enough to act on." "And what happens then?" "He will be removed from the outer council," I said. "Cast out of the pack territories. It is what is warranted." I paused. "He took 20 years of your life." She looked at me then, and for the first time since she had walked into my hall the evening before, something beneath the composure showed itself briefly, not grief, but the acknowledgement of grief, the way a person touches the place where a bruise has healed and finds that it is still there after all. "He didn't mean to take my life in particular," she said. He only meant to keep the seal from being completed. I was incidental. You were not incidental, I said. You were the whole point of the threat. He knew what you were and he tried to erase you. She was quiet. You were not incidental, I said again, because it seemed like the kind of thing that needed saying more than once. She turned her wrist over, looking at the mark. Tell me what it means, she said. What it means in full when both halves come together. Tell me plainly. I turned my own wrist. The Thornvael bloodline seal in its full form is the mark of the Alpha King and his fated mate, I said. In the founding days, when the bloodline was new, it was divided and given to the two people destined for each other, one half each, so that when they found each other the seal would be complete and the recognition would be undeniable. Not a choice imposed from outside, but a proof offered to the people themselves of what the bond already was. I looked at her. The marks don't create the bond. They recognize it. So the bond already exists. In some form, yes. She looked at my wrist beside hers in the morning light. And if I had never been found, if I had walked the outer territories for another 20 years and never came to the boundary stones, the seal would have remained incomplete, I said. I would have remained as I have been, a king who governs without a mate, who has not been able to complete the mark, who has waited without knowing what he was waiting for. I paused because honesty required it. My wolf has been still for 20 years, not dead, still. Last night when you turned your wrist in the torchlight was the first time in 20 years that he has moved. She held that carefully. And mine, she said quietly, mine has not been still. Mine has been restless since I was young, as though it knew it was looking for something and could not find it. She looked at the ridge. I thought I was simply a person who didn't know how to be settled. It never occurred to me that there was something specific I was unsettled toward. You were, I said. You were walking toward this for 20 years. She turned and looked at me directly, and I saw in her face the thing I had been watching for. Not the composure, not the steadiness, but what lived beneath them. A profound, guarded, long-accustomed hope, the kind that has been denied so many times it has learned to make itself very small and very quiet, but that has never, despite everything, gone entirely out. I don't know you, she said again. Not yet. No, I said, not yet. But I think, she stopped, started again. I think I would like to. I will not compress the days that followed into a single moment, because they were not a single moment, and she deserved every one of them. She deserved the morning I showed her the keep, top to bottom, from the wolf hall to the records chamber, all the stone and smoke and worn floor and old portraits in the upper gallery that she looked at with a scholar's careful attention. She deserved the afternoon in the pack's training ground where she watched the wolves run, and did not flinch when the youngest ones came barreling toward her with all the grace of young things not yet in possession of their own size, and caught 2 of them by the scruff, and set them aside without ceremony. She deserved the evening in the records chamber with Bryn, going through the old ledgers with the focused attention of a person reading a document that is also their own life, asking careful questions and receiving careful answers. And I deserved those days too, if I am honest about it. I'm a king who has governed alone for 20 years, and governing alone is a particular kind of narrowing. You become the decisions, you become the judgments, you become the weight of the pack and the maintenance of the walls and the long calculations of winter stores and border disputes and treaty language. You forget, or I forgot, that there is more to being a person than the carrying of a territory. I had not sat on a courtyard wall with someone and talked about hawks in 20 years. I had not been asked a question that was addressed to me, Aldrin, and not to the king. She asked me questions. She asked about the hawks and about the ridge and about my father, whom she had never met but who had made the choice that shaped both their lives, and she asked them the way a person asks who genuinely wants to know and is not performing interest. She listened to the answers the same way. My wolf did not go still again. He stayed awake the entire time, attentive, warm, the way a creature feels when it has been cold for a long time and has finally come in from the weather. On the fourth day, I told her what I needed to do, and I asked her what she wanted. We were in the records chamber again, the three of us, myself, Marin, and Bryn, because Bryn had been doing her own research in the intervening days, and she had things she wanted to say. The ledger was open on the table between us. "The Outer Council meets in 3 days," Bryn said. "Cael will be there. He has been there at every meeting for 31 years, and he believes he is too established to be moved." She looked at me over her candle. "If you are going to act, the meeting is the moment." "I know," I said. "You will need to present the full seal," Bryn said. "It cannot be done with the halves separate. The old compact is clear, the recognition must be public, and it must be complete." She looked at Marin. "That requires both of you." Marin looked at me. "What does that mean, specifically? For the recognition to be public and complete?" "The 2 seals are placed together," I said. "Your wrist to mine. When the bond is recognized, the marks complete the seal, they become the full circle in the old blood ink. The pack witnesses it, the record is made." I paused. "In the old tradition, it is also the moment of formal recognition, the Alpha King naming his fated mate before the pack. It is not a ceremony that can be undone." I met her eyes. "I am not asking you to commit to that. I am asking you whether you are willing." She was quiet for a long moment. The candle between us burned steady, no draft in the deep room. "You could do it without me," she said. "You have the ledger entry, you have Bryn's testimony. You don't need the marks to complete, to remove him from the council." "That's true," I said. "But it wouldn't be the same." "No," I said, "it would not be the same." She looked at her wrist, then at mine. Then, for a long time, at the ledger open on the table, the page where her existence had been written in her father's hand and hidden for 20 years, the page where the promise of this moment had been set down before either of them knew what shape it would take. "I have been walking for 20 years, she said, "looking for the thing I couldn't name, and I am here." She looked up at me. "I would be a fool to walk away from it now, and I have not survived 20 years of wandering by being a fool." "No," I said, "you have not." She nodded once, and it was enough. The Outer Council met in the Great Hall, as they always do. There were 14 of them, men and women of the pack who hold the outer territories and advise the Alpha King on matters of governance and dispute. They sat at the long table in their customary places, and Cael sat at his, at the left-hand end, where he had sat for 31 years. He was old, white-haired, heavy in the face, a man who had long since made himself so much a fixture of the place that people stopped looking at him. He had learned to be overlooked. It had served him. He noticed Marin immediately. I watched him notice her. I watched the small stillness that went through him when he saw her standing to my right, dressed in clothes that Bryn had found from the stores. Not the plain brown cloak anymore, but the dark wool of Thornvael, the gray-blue that the pack wears, because she had been offered it and she had put it on without theatrics, as though she had been cold for a long time and this was warmth. I watched Cael's eyes go to her wrist and then to mine, and I saw him understand, and I saw him begin to think about his options, and I saw him realize in quick succession that he had none. I called the council to order. I told them that before we addressed the business of the morning, there was a matter of the bloodline that required the full council's witness. I told them that the pack's records keeper had found an entry in the bloodline ledger that bore on the Alpha King's line, and on the question of the fated mate's seal. Bryn read the entry. She read it in the clear, unhurried voice of a woman who has read documents aloud for 40 years and knows how to give each word its proper weight. The hall was quiet. I watched the council members, watched the older ones absorb it, watched the recognition move through the ones old enough to remember my father's last years, watched even the younger ones understand from the quality of the older members' stillness that this was significant. When Bryn finished reading, I spoke. I told them what had been done, the division of the seal, the hiding of the girl child, the threat that had necessitated it. I told them what Bryn's research had uncovered about Kael Ven's role. I told them about the years since, the smaller moves against the bloodline, the quiet efforts to ensure the seal remained incomplete, documented in the records with enough specificity to be undeniable. I told them that the woman who stood to my right was the bearer of the other half of the seal, confirmed by Bryn's reading and by the marks themselves, and that I was going to ask the council to witness the completion of the seal now, in this room, before we addressed anything else. Kael Ven spoke. Of course he spoke. A man who has been comfortable for 31 years does not simply sit in silence when the ground opens beneath him. He used the language he had always used, the language of process, of procedure, of the need for further verification and proper channels. He spoke smoothly and at length, and I let him finish, because allowing a man to speak allows everyone in the room to see exactly what he is, and by the time Kael Ven finished speaking, everyone in the room could see exactly what he was. Then I looked at Maren. She stepped forward. She was not nervous, or if she was, it was held somewhere inside her where it did not show on the surface, in that ballast Bryn had named, that quality of not shifting easily. She turned her left wrist upward. I turned my right. We moved them together, and the moment the marks met, edge to edge, the full seal complete for the first time in more than 20 years, the wolf in me went to his feet, and I felt the bond close like a door shutting out the wind, not cold but warm, final and right, the quiet of a thing that has come home. The marks lit. I have heard of it in the old stories, the bloodline seal completing, but I had never seen it and I had not known precisely what it would look like. It was not dramatic. It was not fire. The blue deepened in both our wrists, and the seal, the full circle, hers and mine together, showed itself briefly in the air between our joined wrists, faint and blue and unmistakable, visible to everyone in the torchlit hall. For the space of 3 breaths it held, and then it faded, and the marks settled back into the skin, and the bond was made. The council was entirely silent. Roth, who had come in with the guards and had been lying at the edge of the hall, got to his feet and walked to Maren's other side and sat down. One by one, the other wolves in the hall got up and moved, not toward me, toward her. I had heard of that too. I kept her hand in mine. I had not let go when the seal completed, and she had not moved to take her hand back, and I turned to the council. The bloodline seal is complete, I said. Maren of Thornvael is recognized before this council as the Alpha King's fated mate. This is witnessed, and it will be recorded. I looked at Kael Ven. And you will answer for what you have done. He was very still. 20 years, I said, and I did not keep the weight of it out of my voice. 20 years she walked the outer territories without a pack, without a name in any ledger, without a home, because you moved against a child to stop her from becoming what she was already meant to be. You will be removed from this council and from the pack territories before nightfall, and you will not return. He looked at Maren. I do not know what he expected to see in her face, anger, perhaps, or fear, or the vindication of the wronged woman revealed before her enemy. What he saw was what I was learning to read as simply her. Composed, direct, utterly still, looking at him not with the burning of someone who has long wanted this moment and is finally consuming it, but with the quiet of someone who no longer needs anything from him at all. He dropped his eyes first. The council sat in silence for a moment. Then Weth, the eldest of the outer council members, a woman who had sat at the long table for nearly as long as Bryn had kept the records, set her palms on the table and inclined her head. It was not a bow exactly, but it was its shape. 3 others did the same. Then, in the manner of councils when the understanding of a room shifts, the rest followed. Afterward, when the council had been dismissed and Kael Ven had been escorted to the gate and the great hall had emptied, Maren stood near the fire and I stood across from her, and we were very quiet for a while. The wolves had settled again. Roth had put his head in her lap and was already half asleep. "How is your wrist?" I said. She looked at it. The mark was the same blue as it had always been, but there was a warmth beneath it. I could feel the same warmth in mine, a gentle, steady heat that I understood was the bond settled into its permanent shape. "It doesn't hurt," she said. "It feels," she paused, looking for the word. "It feels completed," she said finally, "like something that was open is now closed." "Yes," I said. "I should be afraid," she said. "I came to a strange kingdom 3 days ago with no expectation of finding anything, and now I am." She stopped. "Thornvael's queen, if you choose to accept it," I said. "The recognition was made before the council. It does not obligate you, but it is there if you want it." She looked at the fire for a moment, then she looked at me. "What do you want?" she said. She asked it simply, as she asked most things, a genuine question that expected a genuine answer. I had been a king for 20 years. I had answered that question in terms of the pack, the territory, the bloodline, the security of the walls, and the filling of the stores and the fairness of the law. I had not been asked it in terms of myself in a long time. "I want what I have spent 20 years waiting for without knowing what it was," I said. "I want the seal to be complete and the bond to be acknowledged, and someone sitting across from me at the high table who is here because she wants to be and not because she was placed there by arrangement." I paused. "And I want it to be you. It has been you for 20 years, whether either of us knew it." She was quiet. Roth breathed deeply under her hand. "It will take time," she said. "I know how to be alone. I will have to learn how to be here." "I know," I said. "There is time." She looked at the fire a moment longer. Then she said, "Did you have a record-keeper's wife make that, the gray-blue wool?" I blinked. "Bryn found it in stores. I believe it was my mother's originally." "It fits," she said. "That's all I was going to say." She smoothed the front of it with her free hand, a small gesture, practical and without sentiment, and yet I understood it, the trying on of the thing, the small assessment of whether it fit not just the body but the rest of it. "Does it?" I said. "Fit?" She looked up at me across the fire and Roth and the great stone hall. "Ask me in a year," she said, and for the first time since she had walked into my hall, she smiled. It was a small smile, guarded at the edges, not yet given over to itself, the smile of a woman who has learned caution and is only beginning, carefully and without hurry, to let it go. But it was there, and it was real, and it was for me. I thought I have been waiting 20 years for this. I did not know that was what I was doing. I thought I can wait a year. The village elders came 10 days later. I sent for them. I could have let it be. Marin had made no request for it, had not asked me to summon anyone on her behalf, and when I told her I intended to do it, she had been still for a moment in the way she was still when something was large. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I said. "Do you want me to?" Another long stillness. "Yes," she said. "Not for punishment. I don't want punishment, but I want them to know what they held and dismissed." She paused. "For whatever else comes after me, for whatever other girl is put out of a village for a mark someone doesn't recognize. I want there to be a record of what that means." So they came. 3 elders of the lowland village that had put her out, older now than when they had made that decision, brought to Thornvael's great hall with the particular discomfort of people who have traveled a long way to face something they would have preferred to leave undisturbed. The eldest of them, who had been the headman when Marin was 16, was a heavy-set man in his 60s, who held himself with the righteous solidity of someone who had spent a lifetime confident in his own correctness. That confidence did not survive the great hall. He had heard the news, of course. News of that kind moves through the outer territories quickly. He knew already, when he walked through the door, that the woman he had put out was standing at the Alpha King's right hand in the dark wool of Thornvael. But knowing a thing and standing inside it are different, and I watched the 3 of them stand inside it with varying degrees of grace. Bryn read the record. Then Marin spoke. She spoke briefly and without theatrics, in the same quiet, direct way that she did most things. She told them what the mark was. She told them what it meant. She told them what her life had been in the 20 years since they had put her out, not to wound them, but to make it concrete, the way an accurate ledger makes things concrete. She did not weep. She did not raise her voice. When she was done, the headman said something that I think he meant as an apology, though it was shaped the way an apology is shaped when a person still cannot quite let go of the idea that they made a reasonable decision. He said that they had not known. He said the mark had been unrecognizable. He said they had only followed the judgment of the time. Marin listened to all of it. Then she said simply, "I know you didn't know what you had, but I knew it wasn't wrong. I knew it from the time I was old enough to know anything. And when someone tells you that something they carry in their own skin is real, you ought to listen." She paused. "That's all I ask. That the next one who comes to you with something you don't recognize, you listen, before you put them out." The headman inclined his head. The other two did the same. I watched them do it, and then I watched them look at Marin, at the gray-blue wool, at her wrist with the completed seal, at the Alpha King of Thornvael standing at her left with his hand at the small of her back, and I watched something shift in their understanding of the world. After they left, Marin stood by the courtyard wall for a long time, looking out at the highland slope. I stood beside her and did not push her for speech. After a while she said, "That was the right thing to do." "Yes," I said. "Thank you," she said. "You had earned it 20 years ago," I said. "The debt was overdue." She looked at the ridge in the distance, the long gray-blue of it in the autumn afternoon. "It doesn't feel the way I thought it would," she said. "How did you think it would feel?" "Larger," she said. "I thought," she stopped. "I thought for years that if I ever found out what the mark was, if I ever found someone who recognized it, everything would open up, some big revelation, all the years of not knowing suddenly resolved." She shook her head. "It doesn't feel like that. It feels more like coming in from a long walk, quiet, tired in a good way. Like you've been carrying something for so long that you don't even notice the weight anymore, and then you put it down, and it's only after that you realize how long you were carrying it." I thought about 20 years of governing alone, the narrowing of it, the way the weight of the territory had become so constant that I had stopped feeling it as weight. I thought about sitting on a courtyard wall in the early morning and talking about hawks and remembering what it was like to be a person and not just a king. "Yes," I said, "that is exactly it." She turned and looked at me, and the small smile was there again, less guarded this time, a little more given over to itself. "You understand that?" "I do." "Good," she said. And then, after a moment, in the practical, unhurried way she did most things. "The wolves are hungry. Roth has been sitting in the doorway of the hall giving me significant looks for the last quarter hour." I looked. Roth was, in fact, sitting in the doorway of the hall giving us both significant looks. "He does that," I said. "I'm going to feed him," she said, and turned from the wall and walked toward him, and he got up and walked beside her into the hall, the old gray wolf and the dark-haired woman in the gray-blue wool. And I stood for a moment in the autumn afternoon with the highland light coming level and golden off the far ridge, and I thought, this is what I was waiting for, and I did not know it, and it is exactly right. There are things I know about her now that I did not know in that first torchlit evening, when she turned her wrist in my hall and changed the ground under my feet. I know that she wakes before dawn, always, not because she cannot sleep, but because she has spent 20 years in places where waking early was a matter of necessity, and the habit is too old to shed. I know she goes to the wolf hall first thing, every morning, and sits with the wolves in the dark before the rest of the fortress stirs, and that Roth sleeps with his head in her lap, and the younger wolves arrange themselves around her with the instinctive ease of creatures who have decided, beyond argument, that she is theirs. I know that she learns things quietly. She does not ask rapid questions or make a display of new knowledge. She watches, she absorbs, she asks one precise question at a time, and 3 days later she knows something so thoroughly that she might have known it for years. Bryn has taken to leaving the records room open for her, and setting out the ledgers she thinks might interest her. And I have come down twice to find them deep in conversation about pack history, Bryn explaining and Marin asking one precise question at a time. I know she has a strong opinion about the construction of the east wall's drainage, and that she expressed it to the head stonemason with the quiet directness she applies to everything, and that the stonemason agreed with her after a moment's consideration, and that the drainage problem that has existed in the east courtyard for 12 years is now being corrected. I know the outer council members, who had watched her completion of the seal with a caution that was not quite suspicion, but was not yet trust either, have begun to direct certain practical questions to her in addition to me, and that she answers them the same way she answered the stonemason, direct, precise, without performance. I know that at night, when the day is done and the hall is quieter and there is no business and no obligation, she sometimes sits at the high table with a cup of something warm and watches the fire and is simply present in the room, and that the room is different with her in it. I do not mean this as a poetic observation. I mean it as a factual one. The room is different, the way a room is different when a thing that was missing from it is there. You do not always know a room is incomplete until the thing that belongs in it arrives. I know that she does not require me to perform. She does not require me to be the king at all times. She has spent 20 years learning to read people quickly, out of necessity, and she saw through the king to the man in the first evening, and she addresses both without confusing them. I know that she is brave in the quiet way that is harder to sustain than the loud kind, the bravery of continuing, of walking forward through 20 years of doors that closed, of keeping the mark and keeping the knowledge of it and not pretending it was something other than it was, even when pretending would have been easier. That kind of bravery does not make speeches. It simply keeps going. I have never known anyone who kept going the way Marin keeps going. I know that the bond, which I felt as a torch lighting the night she arrived, has settled in the weeks since into something steadier, a warmth in the wrist where the seal is, a presence in the chest that is not intrusive but constant, the way the fire in the hearth is constant on a winter night. My wolf is not still any more. He will not be still again. He has come out from wherever he was waiting and he will not go back. And I know this is the thing I have turned over most often, in the wolf hall in the dark and in the courtyard in the early morning and in the records room where the candle burns and Bryn's handwriting makes the old compact real. I know that I spent 20 years as a king and I was good at it. I governed well. The pack is fed and the walls are sound and the law is fair. I did not waste the years. But I was governing an incomplete kingdom, and I did not know it until the evening a woman with travel-worn boots and a wrist she had kept sleeved for 20 years walked into my hall and turned her mark to the torchlight, and the ground shifted, and everything I had built was suddenly the foundation of something larger than I had known how to imagine. It is winter now. The first real snow came 3 nights ago, Highland snow, the heavy kind that settles on the stone parapets and fills the courtyard and makes the far ridge disappear behind white. Marin stood at the courtyard wall the morning after the first snow and looked at the white slope with an expression I have learned to read as the way she looks at things that are genuinely beautiful to her. Not exclaiming, not performing delight, just very still and very present, taking it in completely. I stood beside her. It was like this, she said, when I left. The snow. The morning after, she looked at the white courtyard, the stone walls, the wolves leaving tracks in the fresh snow. When the elder put me out, it was winter, there was snow. I walked south for 2 days before I found a village that would let me sleep by the fire. She said it without drama. I thought about that this morning when I woke up and the snow was there. I thought about how the same snow felt then and how it feels now. How does it feel now? I said. She turned and looked at me. The gray-blue wool, the dark hair, the mark on her wrist that was the twin of mine, the woman who had been walking for 20 years towards something she couldn't name and who was here now, standing in the snow of a highland fortress with the Alpha King of Thornvael beside her. "Like it belongs to me," she said, "like I belong in it." I took her hand, the wrist with the mark, the seal that was half mine and had been waiting for 20 years, the hand of a woman who had carried that mark through every winter since she was 16 and had never let anyone take it from her. I held it in both of mine. "You do," I said. "You have always belonged here. The snow and the stone and the wolves and all of it, it was waiting for you the same way I was." She looked at our hands. She looked at the seal on her wrist, the completed half-circle, warm now in a way it had not been for 20 years of winters. She looked at the ridge in the white distance, all the territory that was hers as much as mine, as it had been from the beginning, as the old compact had always known it would be. And she held on. That is the whole of it, and it is enough. A woman who was told for 20 years that what she carried was false, that she had no right to the mark she was born with, that there was no place for her among people who did not know how to see what she was, and a king who had governed alone, complete in all the ways that could be measured and incomplete in the way that could not be, who did not know what he was waiting for until she walked through his gate. The bond is real. The seal is complete. The wolves know her as well as they know me, and the records show her name, and the council has learned to bring its questions to the high table where there are 2 of us now, and the drainage in the east courtyard has been fixed. It is winter, and the snow belongs to us, and so does the spring that will come after it, and all the ridges beyond that she has not yet seen from the top. I have waited 20 years. I find I am not in a hurry anymore.